Hope everyone is doing well out there. Inshallah, in the Abraham Education Nation. I don't know if I'm going to continue to use that, but I thought about that. Last night, something to call my community, which my online community here, I've been a little disconnected from you guys. So I apologize for that. I do like connecting with you guys, but just been a busy school year. And so I did a live stream with Ishmael a couple weeks ago, and I haven't done a live stream Q&A in quite a while. So if you would like to come by, put the salam in the chat. If I'm having any audio issues or anything, I'm working with a little different setup here that I've used on Zoom conferences before, but I haven't used yet on StreamYard. My hopes with it is it's going to allow me to, I'm using an external camera for the first time through StreamYard, and it was being a little cranky with me, but it seems to be working, and inshallah it's going to allow me to sit back a little bit and be a little more comfortable, because my back can get mad at me while sitting on these things for a while, inshallah. When I looked at my YouTube channel, the last Q&A that I saw on there was 6 months ago. So it's been a little while, so I have some questions that have been provided by my followers, people on my email list, as well as other people, including some non-Muslim teachers, about teaching Muslim kids in public schools. So inshallah, I'll go through those, but I'm more than happy to engage and back and forth or entertain questions from the chat. I appreciate that when that happens. Okay. Jazakumullahu khairan wa barakallahu feek. Okay. So first question, brother asks, I have a question. How do you foresee the religious charter schools debate and legal scrutiny ending? It would be highly beneficial to lower income religious families, especially in America. My thoughts are criticism will exist, but school choice programs have already paved the way for religious clubs to receive public funding. Excuse me. So why not restore Muslims' choices as parents? Please, I'd appreciate your thoughts. Jazakallahu khairan. So I assume this is following up. And I do apologize. The next question is going to be about how Trump affects education, or is affecting education in America. A lot of people have asked me about that. I got a lot of requests to do videos about that. And the last stream was kind of supposed to be about that, but Ishmael planned it. And I had Ishmael on because I wanted to ask him some things regarding the legality and legal implications of some of these executive orders that Trump has been signing. So Ishmael and I scheduled that. And then within 24 hours after we scheduled it, word came down from the Supreme Court that they are going to be hearing the case from Oklahoma, where the Catholic Church has applied to start a religious charter school, and it was approved. It was supported by the previous attorney general, and it is supported by the current governor in Oklahoma State. The previous attorney general, the attorney general changed, and the current attorney general doesn't support it. These are all Republicans, for people wondering. So the current attorney general challenged it. The school did end up getting approved by Oklahoma's charter school board, and they have a central state charter school board. But the attorney general was against it, and he was actually explicit about part of the reason for being against it for him was that it would fund Islamic schools or schools that would teach Sharia or radical Islamic schools. He's actually explicit about that. So, that is how Ishmael and I, our direct involvement in this case that's in the Supreme Court now, actually has some significance because of that and because of what we did here in Minnesota, applying to start an Islamic charter school. We went through the application process with it. Anyway, it was approved. The Attorney General challenged it, and the Oklahoma State Supreme Court reversed the decision of the Oklahoma Charter School Board. They struck it down, saying it's unconstitutional. So then the Catholic Church appealed, or the division down there that's applying for the school, they appealed to the Supreme Court. And after Ishmael and I scheduled that stream, we got word that the Supreme Court will be hearing that case, and they'll have a decision out on it in June. Okay. Now, as far as this brother's question, I think that there is almost zero certainty. I mean, only Allah knows the future, but there's almost zero certainty that this will not be approved by the Supreme Court. What am I saying? The Supreme Court is going to rule in favor of the Catholic Church. And when they rule in that, it will become explicit now that the charter school systems cannot discriminate against religious schools. Meaning the charter school system will have to fund religious schools. And like, actually, the argument we made, I should still have the video up on my channel. I have a video called like Islamic charter schools in America. Like, I think the thumbnail says like important message to the Muslim community in America or something like that, where I lay out the whole illegal argument for it, because based on rulings that the Supreme Court did in 2020, it should be legal now. And that was the reasoning of the former Attorney General in Oklahoma, and it's the reasoning of the current governor in Oklahoma. So this will just be like this will really just be making it, it's implicitly, it implicitly should be the case based on recent rulings from 2020 and 2019, I guess 2021, from the Supreme Court in Carson versus Mackin, case out of Maine. I think it's Espinoza versus Montana, case out of Montana. It's implicit from those cases that religious charter schools should be allowed. This case will just make it extremely explicit, so the states can't deny it anymore, and the charter school system will have to not discriminate against religious schools. Okay, now why am I so confident that will happen? One, because of the previous rulings that the court has already done, and number two, the Supreme Court is 6-3 conservative. All of the conservative judges are Catholic. And this case is actually somewhat of a culmination of a long-standing beef, if you will, between Catholics and the Catholic Church and the public education system. Part of why the Catholic Church itself put so much funding into a private school network in America in the late 19th, early 20th century was because the American public school system basically used to be a Protestant school system, and they felt discriminated against that. They felt that violated the First Amendment at that time. They thought that their own Catholic schools should have been able to be funded by tax dollars back then. And they still feel the same, even with it turning secular, with the public school system turning secular. So for many different reasons, okay, like abortion is another issue that conservative Catholics feel very passionately about. There's always been a strong strand of conservative Catholics who get involved in law in the United States of America. And all of these conservative judges on the Supreme Court are from that. And this is like one of their issues. Okay, they want public funding for private schools. And particularly, a lot of people of that thinking are centered in the University of Notre Dame, which has a think tank / law firm called the Religious Liberty Clinic. And they are the legal counsel for the Catholic Church in Oklahoma. And they also gave pro bono counsel to myself and Ismail Royer when we applied for an Islamic charter school here in Minnesota. And just to give you an idea, the leader of that clinic is a woman. Her name is Nicole Gardner. She is pretty much best friends with Amy Coney Barrett, who is the Supreme Court justice, because they met when Nicole Gardner was a law clerk for Clarence Thomas, who's still on the court, and Amy Coney Barrett was a law clerk for Antonin Scalia, who was a famous conservative judge on the court, who some of the other ones who are on there currently model themselves after. So this is like, and Amy Coney Barrett actually recused herself from this case. She's not going to make a ruling on it, and it's not exactly known why, but I believe it's because she has such close personal connections to the strand of the Catholics who are the petitioners in this case. So there's very, very little doubt that ruling is going to go through in favor of religious charter schools. Okay. Now, does that open the floodgates for everyone who wants to start a Islamic charter school that will receive public funds? Obviously, it's going to be more complicated than that, and I think that's what the brother was getting to with his question. Bismillah. So, I mean, and I went through the process last year of applying for a charter school. I learned a lot with that. There's 2 schools that I'm working with on an ongoing basis here, and advising their admin and doing instructional coaching and doing the professional development for the schools. One's a private school. It's not a private school. You may have seen some recent videos I've posted of the work of that school I'm doing with. The other is a charter school. So I worked as a teacher in a charter school like 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago, but this year I've gotten really close to seeing the inside of the administration of a charter school. And again, last year I went through the process of applying for one. And I mean, this is great. Okay. This is a great opportunity, exactly as the brother says, for low income families, especially in the Democratic states where they do not have vouchers, for families to be able to afford a religious education. And actually, the argument we made in applying to the state of Minnesota for an Islamic charter school was we had all this evidence from surveying the community in partnership with another organization here that showed that families wanted religious education, but they couldn't afford it. And then a charter school has a specific charter. That's why it's called that, meaning they have like a specific mission. And part of the purpose of charter schools is they're supposed to diversify the educational offerings. And the argument of the first Oklahoma Attorney General who supported it, and the argument for this in general, is that you can't say you want alternative educational offerings and that you're going to fund private citizens to do that, but then say that it can be open to everyone except religious people. You're discriminating against religion then, and it's a violation of the First Amendment. It's actually a gross violation of the First Amendment. But with charter schools, just one thing about this, there is just a limit to how many charter schools there can be, possibly based on funds. States have limits to it. And also too, to start a charter school, you're pretty much contingent on getting a federal grant, which once you get approved by the state or an authorizer in your state, there's a good chance of getting the grant, but you get a big federal grant for like a few $100,000, if not even like $1 million, to get the school started, basically. Okay. There's limited amounts of those grants that can be given out every year, basically. So that's just the part of the point. Okay. There's hot competition for charter schools and to start charter schools and for all these different funds and this type of stuff. So it doesn't mean that just like everyone's going to be able to do it. Okay. Now, in that respect, like vouchers is still the best option. I'll also say too, from my work with the two different schools this year, a charter school and private school, there's way more freedom with a private school. There's just way more freedom. You know, a charter school, I mean, the states too, with the legal fallout, they will try to say initially, okay, you can be religious, but you still got to teach X, Y, Z and this type of stuff. And this will be a conflict because the state will still see it as they have the authority to say to the school, you still have to follow all the state requirements. Now, what if they have a state requirement for the education or education standards that goes against, sorry, I'm just reading the chat here. What the religious school wants to teach your religious beliefs in the school. Now, I will tell you, having, dug into that legal aspect specifically, I think that the state won't be allowed to enforce that, and Ismail's gone over that with me a lot too. But that could be a legal battle in itself. That could be a whole legal battle in itself that plays out in this type of thing. What if these states try to start scrapping the charter schools? Okay, I will tell you, here in Minnesota, there is a defined and specific campaign going on against charter schools right now, and I believe this issue is a part of the reason why. Who's doing it? I believe it is the teachers union that is using their connections in the press and in the Democratic Party here in Minnesota to essentially press the Department of Education to give heavier scrutiny to the charter schools, which they do have a right to do. And then also at the same time, like, they're having articles published in the local newspaper, the Minneapolis Star Tribune, or in particular, about how charter schools are failing and this type of stuff to make it look bad. And I think they're doing it. Actually, this is part of the issue. The bigger issue is really because they're losing kids to charter schools. So there will be a political battle that takes place. Now, what might be the better thing is to try to use this issue as a political tool or leverage to try to get the Democratic states to start some sort of voucher system. Say, hey, if you don't want to have the charter school system have to fund religious schools, then give us vouchers so we can do it that way, and everyone will be happy. Look, a whole other thing too, you have to understand also that the charter school world itself is not necessarily pro-religion or pro this idea. There are some charter schools that are like Hebrew focused. There's some that are Arabic focused. that are like, homogeneous in religiosity or ethnic group of their student demographics. And but like, okay, like in some states like Minnesota, it's nonprofit organizations that do the authorizing of charter schools. Like some of them just themselves, they won't want to do this because ideologically that's maybe not where they are, or they won't agree with the rule in this type of stuff. So there's all different types of points to like make it kind of mucky in different ways. But this isn't to say that's not a positive thing overall. Okay. But I think it's best if it can just result in more charter schools, or more religious, or more funding for religious private schools. Okay. Now, second question I've had several questions about the effect of Trump on education. I'll get to that next. I had someone specifically send me a clip of Trump saying that he's gonna implement a universal voucher system. So everyone in the country is going to have a voucher that they can use for a private school. And also, okay, questions about this idea of funding the Department of Education. Okay, now, firstly, I've not been following everything that is going on with Trump at all. Okay, I usually get ill by having to hear about elections and stuff by the time that the election starts to roll around. Okay, I quit going on X 2 months ago, so I'm not like updated with everything going on. But like, okay, the idea of universal voucher system, cutting the Department of Education, and then his executive orders. Let's just talk about those really quickly. Okay. And if you're watching, do feel free to put questions in the chat. Mahmoud, I see your question. I will address that. And Truth Seeker, walaikum assalam wa barakatuh. So first of all, I don't see how Trump. The only way Trump could do a universal voucher system is to have the House and the Senate pass a universal voucher system that involves infusing a whole lot more funds into public education than the federal government is already putting into it. Okay, so I've explained several times on the channel. Public education in America, it's local first. And by the way, if you're watching from England or Europe, I have lots of questions collected from you guys. I know some of you got mad at me for not doing streams at this time that was conducive to Europe. I'm just getting a little self-conscious of talking so much about America in the beginning. I am going to get to some of those questions as well that were specifically from Europe. But what was I going to say? Universal vouchers. Like on average, 13% of funding for schools comes from the federal government. It comes from the law that is called ESSA, which is currently titled the Every Student Succeeds Act, originally called the Elementary and Secondary Schools Act. And, by buying into that law, essentially, you can get funds for specific things. Low-income kids get you more funds. There's funds in that for professional development for every school, for special education. Not all the funds for special education, most of that comes from the state, but some there. Okay. Now Trump could, and I believe, I believe a congressperson from South Dakota put a law forward that would take those funds, and instead of giving them to the states with specific line items, it would just give them to the states as like block grants that the states could then choose what to use them for. That still is a law that has to pass grants, and that's still only like, again, it's like 13% of the funds that go to schools. If they have low income kids, it's going to be more like 20% of their funds will come from there. If Trump were to take those funds and try to say, let's use them for a voucher system instead, that still would have to pass Congress. And that's not enough funds to give to every parent to fund a full education for their kid. Because overall, the vast majority of the money funding public education is coming from the states and it's coming from municipalities. So that's not like, that's not something that's really realistic for him to say, yeah, we're going to do a universal voucher system. It'd take a huge act of Congress that would have like, I mean, already the billions of dollars that they put in just through the Every Student Succeeds Act, you'd have to like 5 times it to make a proper voucher system for the numbers to add up, to replace the funds that the states are using, and to make it workable for like private schools that would want them. Maybe you could repurpose it and give it something that's a grant, so it gives like $1,000 to every family, or 1,500 or something like that. It's not even close to what you need. Just look up the average amount of funds that are spent publicly per kid per school. It changes by district, but you're going to be and state, but you're going to be seeing something from $13,000 to $15,000 per kid. And then when you break that down, you'll see something like 7,000 to 8,000 come from the state. The rest come from the local municipality. So the federal government could make that up, but it would blow up the federal budget so much. This whole Doge thing that they got going on and government efficiency, is that likely to happen? Is the political climate that they've set up have the appetite for that? I don't think so. Okay. That to me, the universal voucher thing was something Trump was saying to sound good, sound nice, to get votes. Lisa Nova watching from England. Thank you. Jazak Lacher. I like when people say where they're watching from. Hudayfa says, Assalamu alaikum. It's been a while, mashallah. Wa alaikum assalam. Yes, and it's nice to see familiar names and things. I do miss you guys, okay? And I do appreciate everyone who comes on the stream and asks these questions and this type of stuff. And I apologize for not doing it more regularly. There's always so much content I'd like to get out. Time's just not there. So, okay. I think likely cutting the Department of Education is the same thing. Something you said to sound cool. There's a strand of Republicans who've really wanted that for a long time. But the thing about the Elementary and Secondary Schools Act and any other act that appropriates funding for specific things in public schools, legislation from Congress appropriates that. So it's the executive's branch to execute it. Okay, it's the executive branch's job to carry it out. So this federal money that goes to education, Jimmy Carter decided to create a Department of Education. Actually, I'm not even sure. Actually, no, I'm sorry. The Department of Education, I believe, was created by an act of Congress. So that's the whole thing with it, too. If it was an act of legislation from Congress that created the Department of Education, you can't just destroy the Department of Education through an executive order. You'd have to do it through an act of Congress. So even if he did that, he'd get a Supreme Court challenge, and it would get struck down for doing that. And that type of implication exists with a lot of these executive orders, from my understanding. Now, the other thing too, though, okay, if he does an executive order that says we're not doing the Department of Education anymore, that doesn't change the fact that Congress has line item funds for certain things, a certain amount of funds. It would just have to change the mechanism by which the federal government distributes those funds. Okay, again, thinking about government efficiency. If you have all this bureaucracy set up for these funds to go through these channels to get to these places, and does it make sense to just destroy those channels, but then we still have to figure out how those funds get to those places in a different way? Maybe it does. I don't think it does, because you'd have to have a whole bunch more bureaucracy just figuring out how to do that. Makes more sense to just keep the bureaucracy that exists in place. So I think that whole cutting the Department of Education thing, I don't anticipate that is going to happen, and it won't change the funding. You need to ask the Congress to change the funding. Okay, that's the other big thing. All right. Now with the executive orders, okay, I've been asked about the DEI one. Excuse me. Which in the title of that is something about restoring meritocracy or merit-based thing. And I should have reread it right before the stream, but I read it a couple of weeks ago. And I've talked to a couple of people in diversity departments in school districts here in Minnesota. So an executive order dictates regulation for how the executive branch carries things out. So it doesn't really have an effect on school districts. Now, the one with gender is a little different because it specifically references the federal law, that the Every Student Succeeds Act. It specifically references the federal law that gives funding to schools, and it specifically references a part of that law that schools who take those funds, which is all schools, all public schools, have to comply with. So that one's a little different. But the DEI one was about training and programming within the federal government. Okay, it's not within school districts. So my talks with people in diversity departments, leading those departments in 2 different school districts here, they've not heard any guidance from the Minnesota Department of Education about that. I'm planning to meet with someone who works in that department in the Minnesota Department of Education, soon, inshallah, to find out his take on it. But they're going about business as normal, I'll tell you, in the school districts as far as diversity and education stuff. And I'm doing my spring reach out for engaging Muslim students in public schools, my pre-Ramadan reach out. By the way, Ramadan, always a good time to refer people to the book and the course, abrahameducation.com, all that type of stuff, please. Okay. Helpful. And I'm getting the same responses as normal. I've have a meeting on Wednesday with a big school district here. I'm not getting any pushback or anything like that. So I'm not seeing it affecting it too much. Okay. And some content I want to put out is talking more about educating professionals in different areas in whatever professional context you're in. I know there's been some things like some companies, I saw an article about Target doing it here, like they've scrapped their diversity departments or programs. That's not following Trump's executive order. That is responding to the kind of public sentiment that is against it right now. Okay. And by the way, I'm not saying that I agree with or like every aspect of diversity education. Okay. I'm just saying it's an opportunity for Muslims to educate the public about themselves. And those types of trainings have existed before the terms DEI ever existed, by the way. Okay. In the 90s, they called it more multiculturalism training. And those things will continue to exist. So, no one should feel bad about it. And again, Muslims, you can't think of yourself. You got to stop thinking of yourselves as being like having to be responsive to everything going on. Okay. When I do diversity trainings with schools, it's not like the other diversity trainings. And what Trump's executive order is targeting is specifically trainings that essentially teach or imply that there is something like inherently privileged about being white, this type of thing. The training program that has perpetuated that idea, mostly in education, is the training program either called Beyond Diversity or Courageous Conversations About Race that was started by a man named Glenn Singleton. I actually talk about that training in my book and the parts where, as a Muslim, I agree and disagree with it, and how it's an opportunity for Muslims to be understood better in some ways, but also it kind of, misses the mark a lot of times. And part of the problem that I always had with those trainings was it conceptualizing students of color as all being in the same net and that type of thing. So, when there's this type of political atmosphere where people are like feeling uneasy or unsure, it's an opportunity. Okay, it's an opportunity to offer something that is well done and is a palpable message. That's a whole thing that people actually, I think, really a lot of people experience discomfort with some diversity education. Is all they get is a feeling of confusion and discomfort about it. Okay, they get like some my training and what we would train as Muslims, it's not about that. It's just teaching factual information about concrete things. Okay, and people appreciate that type of stuff. So this thing, okay, I know the gender one is like a heavy thing, and Muslims are generally feeling good about it. Give me a moment here to think through everything about it. So with ESSA, with the Elementary and Secondary Schools Act, Title 9 of it, Section 9 or Title 9 of it, I believe was passed in 1972. And it said that to comply with this law that gives funds from federal funds to schools, excuse me, public schools that take those funds, they can't discriminate on the basis of gender. They have to have equal opportunities for gender in sports and in everywhere. Okay. Now, the Biden administration gave guidance in May of last year, specifically saying that in Title IX, the word gender has to be interpreted according to how the student identifies. There's self-identifying gender. Okay. And they had some things leading up to it too. And they made like the really clear one then. So like over the summer and stuff, I was telling Muslim parents, if you watch some of the summers I did, like I can't guarantee you next year that the principal is going to be of your kid's school is going to be able to give the girls a bathroom where they don't have to share it with a biological male who's identifying as a female, unless it's single use, which is the direction most schools are going in to deal with this issue. Which was very scary for a lot of families, just the reality. And for any non-Muslims watching who don't empathize with, Muslims or conservative people on this issue, I'm sorry, but, do please read my book and learn what the sensitivities actually are and why they can't change. And, please be tolerant of other people's stances and opinion, because this is a highly sensitive and worrying issue that's caused a lot of anxiety in the Muslim community. So Trump's executive order essentially reverses it. It explicitly strikes down all the executive order guidance that the Biden administration gave, and it specifically says that schools have to interpret gender according to biological factors and get specific about it. So that should make it so it's the case that the bathroom issue ought to be resolved in that respect. There's other things that come along with it. Okay. I mean, there's some, when this type of things happen, because the schools are local, they look for guidance from the Department of Education, from the State Department of Education, about what to do about it. And some of them might some of them might say, well, there's going to be court challenges about this. So we're going to wait until that carries out. That type of thing can happen. Okay. So, if you go on Department of Education websites, there's email addresses on there. Reach out to the Department of Education in your state and find out how they are interpreting the new executive orders and get the details about it. All right. Sports are a whole other thing. I believe the executive order is very explicit about sports. Title IX in general really affects sports. And I've heard from lots of families, particularly here in Minnesota, of having the girls in sports and they're being playing against biological males. I've heard about it happening quite a bit in Minnesota here. In Minnesota, Minnesota's sports regulations in the schools is governed by policies of a nonprofit organization called the Minnesota Sports High School Sports League or something like that. And they organize all the state tournaments and everything like that. And their policies, and there's actually school districts a lot of time use that organization's policies as their general school policies too. Like in a school district here in America, or not in Minnesota, in the south suburbs here, where there are some Muslim families pushing against a policy that was passed by the school board to interpret gender according to the student's choice. And also there was some policy of hiding it from the parents under certain circumstances. Parents got very upset about that. The assistant superintendent, when he met with all those Muslim families, he told them, we go by what the Minnesota State Sports High School League says, which is a nonprofit organization, but they're so enmeshed with regulations of the public school sports system that their regulations are followed in other areas. Now I have some questions about, like, what if you have a youth sports league that is not part of the public school district, it's just like a basic youth sports league, but they will still generally follow that organization's policies, and that organization itself is not a public entity. It's a nonprofit, but they base their policies off of of knowing they're telling public entities to do. And then you have the issues like with youth sports leagues, like, well, okay, what if they are renting spaces? That's a big thing too. You might have a youth sports league where it's not part of the school district itself, but all of their activities take place in the public facilities of the school district. What about that? I honestly don't know the answer to all those questions, that type of thing. I honestly don't know. But I mean, look, overall, I will say, honestly, what I've seen from the school districts and my talks with people is that they've kind of gotten the message from parents about this. I've talked a little bit about here in Minnesota, they're doing this surveying that they do every 2 years of the kids, where they will ask they will ask questions about sensitive and intimate matters and this type of stuff. I saw from a Muslim parent the other day that their school district, which was one I've done training for, by the way, they sent an email to families letting them know the survey was coming, letting them know the explicit sensitive stuff that it had and for what grades that it had that for, and they gave a direct link to an opt-out form for it. I was extremely happy to see that. I know in other school districts, even before this executive order was passed with bathrooms and stuff, they were trying to go towards single use ones as opposed to ones where more than one kid is at the same time. Now, it's still not ideal for different reasons, because for Muslims, because of the different ways that we use the bathroom and this type of stuff. I mean, I can't imagine any female being content with following a biological male into the bathroom or going after him or her for various reasons. But that was something too. The state of Minnesota started providing specific grants for to remodel bathrooms. So instead of being communal gathering ones, they'll be single use ones. There's benefit that's too, because you get less kids socializing in the bathroom, and you get them making less TikTok videos in the bathroom, all this type of stuff. So I have the feeling, Minnesota's a very liberal state for the most part, and I just have the feeling that school districts have kind of gotten the message with a lot of that stuff. But, just continue to communicate with your school district in a productive manner, which Muslims are doing a good job of overall. And others who care about these issues appreciate the work Muslims have done. Just continue to do that and make sure about things, and all that type of stuff. Okay, Joe Bass says, Q&A for topic. Any topic, brother. Any topic, okay? Any topic. Salams from Libya. Walaikum salam. Libya. Salam alaikum wa barakatuh. Walaikum salam wa barakatuh. Watching from England. Saw that. Keep that U.S. stuff coming. Okay. Inshallah. Your Q&A for Abraham education stuff. Okay, guys, if you're watching, I'm glad that you're here with me. Go ahead, throw a question in the chat, but I will get to the questions I have gathered in the meantime. Bismillah. Excuse me. Okay. Email here. And with this new setup, I have the external camera. I have the laptop over here and can look at the questions on my phone easier that were in my email. Excuse me. Okay, so brother asks, number one, this brother asked, when am I going to do part 3 of how to manage kids? Yeah, like, I don't think that's in my plans right now. Okay, just I'll try to give more on that, because I had a decent cohort of people who did the first 2 sessions. But to keep going and try to add, like, I'm going to try to do something to get a bigger gathering, to have an ongoing online cohort of parents and teachers, this type of stuff around selling the course. And I do have most of Parenting Skills Muslims Need as a course up free on the channel right now. That will be ending soon, probably by the end of Ramadan, just so you know. But this brother asks, I have an autistic child in my class, and I'm scheduled to receive 2 more ADHD kids soon. How do I teach them? They're driving me crazy. Okay. So, first of all, I'm very hesitant to entertain the idea, like, fundamental good teaching and fundamental good classroom management is fundamental good teaching and good classroom management. So, do ADHD kids and kids with autism, do they need more of that, or do they need less of that? Do they need more of that? Or do they need something differently entirely than that? It's not like the fundamentals of what works with kids in classroom management teaching, like, fundamentally changes with kids. Okay. Now, with an autistic kid, of course, depends how high functioning they are, how verbal they are. Most likely, if they are in your class, they are functioning enough and high functioning enough and verbal enough that they can function in a class. If they're not, they maybe should be in a therapy clinic or something differently during the day. Okay. But okay, like good classroom management and teaching, predictability, consistent routines and procedures, consistent and predictable implementation by the teacher. Are these kids going to benefit from that, or are they going to be worse from, or do they need you to mix it up? The first thing you need to do is just be more predictable and more consistent with how you implement things, and sticking to your expectations even tighter. That's what you need first of all. Okay. Now, some autistic kids, so autistic kids, a lot of times they don't always get, so they don't get social cues that well all the time. Sometimes they can really benefit when directions are paired with a visual. A lot of times what a teaching assistant will do, if like in a public school, if you have a paraprofessional who is paired with the autistic kid, they will give them they will go through specific exercising. The teacher might wear a lanyard all day that has like a different image or a different color that associates with common commands that you give the kids all day. So like sit still, okay, be quiet, raise your hand, that type of stuff. And you do practice sessions with the kids, with the kid where, okay, I'm going to show you this card, and then you do it. And autistic kids, a lot of times they can do well if they have, if it's set up where they can act things out in a scripted type of fashion. Now, with the routines and procedures of the day, that works with all kids. So, like a regular class, maybe you manage like making them raise their hands better by just like when the kids interject, you pause and you say, "I'm sorry, you have to raise your hand. I don't answer questions when you just interject." All right. Excuse me. And kids will get trained that way. If you are consistent in not answering the question when they raise their hand, or reminding them they have to when they don't raise their hand, or reminding them that they do have to raise their hand. If you're consistent with that, the kids get over time. It might help with autistic kids if you have a card with a kid doing this, or you have a visual that you point to on the board, where along with giving that verbal reminder, you also point to the visual. And then, if you do that enough and get to the point where you just point to the visual and you don't have to say it so much. But again, that works with all kids. And actually practicing scripting it out, like in an isolated practice way, could help the kids that type of way. And anything else, okay, being calm, like some of those, like sometimes autistic kids, they struggle with like understanding physical barriers and this type of stuff. And like some of them, like they can get a lot of comfort from having certain repetitive physical motions, this type of thing. Okay. Now, again, with that type of thing, like if you can gauge if there's a place and a way to give the kid room to be able to do what he has to do with that, that might be best. If you don't have the capacity to implement that, then you have to do practice with giving him a cue to calm his or her body down, or that type of thing. Okay. These are just examples. If you do have to do something different with the kids, something that's commonly done in schools with this to make them understand, because sometimes the thing that comes up with, okay, like I can remember when I taught at the charter school of all Latino kids and having one kid who had ADHD, and it was part of his IEP, his individualized plan, that when we would do instruction during a certain part of the day, instead of sitting with the rest of the class, he could sit in the back and color on a sheet to like calm himself down while the rest of the class didn't have to listen. Okay. I was okay with that. I honestly, teaching that kid, felt that he did not need that. I honestly felt that. If you're just consistent enough, as you are with all kids, that he could fall into the expectations well enough. But that was part of his individualized education plan. Now, then the thing comes up, well, why does he get to, do that and the rest of us don't? That type of thing. So sometimes what they do in elementary school is they'll do a little activity where they will say, okay, guys, I want to teach you a lesson about something. And I'm going to give each one of you a card. And on the card, there's going to be a different illness on it. And I'm going to be like the doctor, and I'm going to give you the cure for your illness. And you give each kid a card. They all have a different ailment of some type. Okay, the flu, broken leg, whatever, this type of stuff. And then you say, okay, kids, now I'm going to give each one of you the treatment for your illness. And you give every kid the Band-Aid. All right. And then you ask, like, okay, does that make sense for me to do that? No, 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 no. Okay. And then you say, this makes a concrete connection to the kids. Look, like sometimes when we need something in life or when we're trying to learn, not everyone needs the same thing all the time. So there's going to be times in class where some kids are doing something, doing it. And then that you've set a context where you can relate that type of thing to the kids. Okay. If it's part of the reason they do that way in this kind of, I know that's a little indirect, but it does work. And part of the reason that they do that in a public school in America is that kid has a diagnosis who's getting that special accommodation, but he also has student data privacy rights that don't allow you to say to the other kids, well, this kid has this diagnosis, so that's why he gets to do that. So you kind of got to come up with a clever way to do that if that's the route you're going to take. Okay, so that's the best I can give with, I think I have, just give me one sec. Some books. Other one. This was a decent book. that helped me. 10 Things Every Child with Autism, which, as you knew, this book helped me when I was teaching kids with autism. That's a decent book you can get to. Okay. Okay. Next question. See if we have anything in the chat. Masood says, Salam brothers, Mahmoud from Austin. I was actually in Texas in December, brother. I might actually be there kind of soon. Maybe more the Dallas area though. Watched recent Asufa Academy videos. How has your experience been this year? What results do you see in kids, teachers, school culture? Any challenges? Yeah, I'm really having a good time with Asufa Academy here in Minnesota. It's a cool school. It was just a HIVS program. It spawned into a full Islamic school as a result of COVID, actually responding to the needs of COVID, basically. It started with the kids doing online, and over time, they hired teachers, and it's a full-blown Islamic school, though there's still a portion of kids who are in the same building who just do a HIVS programs too. And I haven't trained the teachers of those kids, but I have trained all the teachers and ongoing observation and coaching, a day of professional development every month at the school of those teachers, and it's going well. Alhamdulillah, it's going well. It's going good overall. The really nice thing about it is run by a brother who is a full-time engineer, and he principals the school on a volunteer basis. He's not an educator originally, so he's really given me a lot of freedom in what I direct him to do and direct everyone to do and all that type of stuff. And he is also the board chairman, and the other board members, the people are just people involved in the school. There's not those types of special interests or anything going on with the school. And his brother, it just amazes me. May Allah reward him, because this school, inshallah, will be a great sadaqah jariyah for him, because he has taken nothing from it. And he raised funds to buy out a building here that was built in 2010. It's a pretty new building. And it's a building that was originally a private business college for adults, but it has nice rooms, good setup with the projectors and everything, plenty of space in the classrooms. And he's got, things in place for additions to it and all this type of stuff. So alhamdulillah, I'm really enjoying that school. And I got a lot of good feedback from parents the other day, both before and after that seminar, of the impact of the trainings. So I encourage everyone to watch the recent video that I posted of that, to learn about building a really high expectation school culture as a system. Because those different elements I talk about it with different schools, I've worked on it in bits and pieces, but with this school, I'm really having the chance to kind of put the whole thing together. Now it's still up to the people to implement it. I am finding when you really teach stuff, and especially as you get into observation and coaching, and that kind of becomes a thing where you support people on a little bit more of an individual basis, which is nice. But you also have to hold people accountable for what their teaching practices are, which you can do at a private school. And that kind of has a way of weeding people out sometimes. Okay, but not too many, most people on board. Do you plan coming to LA for any event in the future? Brother, I don't have specific plans to go to LA. California is expensive to travel to. I have looked into maybe I looked into a couple of years ago, because I go to Seattle. Seattle's expensive to go to too. But I have a predictable market in Seattle now for engaging Muslim students in public schools. I looked into, or explored around renting a place there, doing an event, a live event for engaging Muslim students in public schools, inviting people and seeing what I can do there. But number one, I've gotten enough response actually from California as a market just for online stuff. And yeah, it's just kind of expensive to go there. Now, brother, if you want to connect me with a masjid there or something, I'd be more than happy to come and do seminars for parents, other seminars that talk about other things. And then we can try to pair it with a training for maybe a local Islamic school, local public schools. I'm more than happy to do that. Okay, I'm more than happy to do that. Guys, any of you who follow me, if you have a local masjid, our local community, refer them to me, tell them to get in touch with me. I'm more than happy to do that for any place. And I've done it with multiple places now. And it's nice when you can do that, more than happy. Cool bookshelf. Hey, nice. It's a very nice comments. Yes, I like the bookshelf as well. It's maple. It's hardwood. Alhamdulillah. Okay. Jason is okay. Whatever. Jason asks, I had mentally impaired kids throw hard objects on me, split my face open. They weren't even upset or agitated. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the context of that was, brother, but like, kids who are on that type of a level of emotional dysregulation, they need special types of services, and they need to be in a clinic or in a certain part of the school with a specialist who is equipped to deal with that. Okay. All right. Let's get to more questions that we have here. Bismillah. Okay. Question. My son's school in Dublin makes a deal out of Halloween and Christmas. Is Dublin, is that Ireland or Germany? That's Ireland, correct? It's Berlin. That's Germany. I get them confused. Excuse me. Sorry, I've got a little congestion going on. Okay, my son's school in Dublin. My son's school in Dublin makes a big deal out of Halloween and Christmas. They're always doing activities, and my son feels awkward not joining in. In fact, he gets excited about those things. My husband doesn't want him to feel left out or get alienated. I just want to stick to our Islamic values. What do I do? Yeah, this stuff is not easy. I don't know. I write extensively about this stuff in my book. So, even though that book is written for non-Muslim educators, you might get some ideas from reading the book better than what I can remember off the top of my head right now, just because I do talk a little bit about kind of the social emotional experience for kids with this and the difficulty it has for parents of this whole missing out idea for kids that they have around the holidays in the West and that type of stuff. Public schools in America, they are, they differ from place to place, but they're generally getting sensitive with this type of stuff. And if you educate them, they generally start doing less of it. But I know in England and Ireland, they don't have they don't have the same laws as we do in America that separates religion from the public schools in the same way. And I remember actually talking with a family member, someone married to a family member who was from the small town in the UK, talking to him about my work, and she asked me, well, what about what do the Muslim kids do when they do the Trinity play? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she said, like, oh, I mean, what she told me was all, I don't know if she was from Yeovil. It might just be, which I think is in Somerset. It might just be some schools in the UK, but she told me like it's a thing in UK schools. They do a Trinity, or nativity play. They do a nativity play around Christmas and stuff. So what are the Muslim kids with that? I don't know what they do with that. I'm assuming, again, I don't know the education system there as well. But look, with the kids, number one, you want to prepare them for what they're getting into before they get into it. Okay. So, you don't want to make having to talk about it reactionary to him partaking in whatever activity when he already got excited about it. Okay. It's really important raising Muslim kids in the West that you talk to them about some big concepts in Islam from a young age. A young kid can understand Tawheed. They can, they intuitively know that they're created, all that type of stuff. I believe in my parenting course, I talk about I have a video where, and this is when I don't have public right now. So I got to get the course to get this, but I have a video or one of the modules where I talk about different developmentally when you should have different Islamic talks per se with kids at different ages. Now, age 6 is a really big age because kids can start to understand past and present a lot better. They have a better grasp of that around age 6. So, I gave talks to my kids at a very, very young age where I showed them a world map. I showed them visually how Islam progressed, and it got here this many years ago, and then it kind of stopped here, like at the border of Spain, and then it went away from Spain. Because I wanted my kids from a young age to have an idea, very strong idea that this Islam thing, yeah, you're living around people who don't know about it. And of course, the final section of my parenting course talks about the importance of giving your kids an Islamic mission, and this is all part of it. So I don't see how Muslim kids really get by with a strong Muslim identity without having the idea that it's part of their job to educate people in the society about Islam who don't already know about it. Okay, So therefore, you can set a kid up to have the view that these things going on around it, we have Islam gives us a different view about it. And the people you're around, they might not know about that. That's because they're misguided. Doesn't Not because they're inherently bad or anything yet, but no one's had the chance to guide them yet. And it's not your job to guide them now, but you need to keep this in mind while you see all these things going on around you, okay? And then you decide on the barriers of what is, that itself mentally reminding of that message can, it will allow the kids to reflect on it, even at a young age. You always have these conversations in a calm way, okay? And then you try to decide on what the barriers are of having fun. So, like, look, if they're doing that Halloween activity, okay, you can color that pumpkin or whatever, but look, it's better if you don't do something scary because we don't want to do, okay, something like that. Try to explain it like that, all right? Look, if the teacher's giving out candy because it's Halloween or something, okay, you can take it. I'm not gonna what I mean? Like you kind of negotiate with the kid in this type of way. I think makes sense. You don't want to just be anxious and restrictive, is my opinion on that. Okay, with different things. Now, in addition to this, it's very helpful if the kid knows that you're making an effort to educate the school on it. So you can provide my book, you can provide my course. No reason people in the UK or Ireland can't take it. Some of the people I've talked to in the UK, who have given my book or tried to advocate on this type of stuff, it does appear to me that there is a bit more of a tendency, and I don't know if it's a snobbiness in the UK, that if they say to the school, I don't want my kids singing the Christmas carols or something like that, that the headmaster might say, "Oh, you're an extremist," or something like that. It seems to be I have the impression people are a little bit more bold about saying that type of thing in the UK than here. So that can be a thing. But I will say, I think that type of thing is more likely to take place when you're responding in a conflict or you're responding. So being proactive is so important, guys. I've emphasized that so much. Okay. When you wait around to educate people about Islam and to educate about what it means to be a Muslim, all that type of stuff, for some conflict to take place, whether it's interpersonal, organizational, whatever level it's at, society level wide, and you're just responding to conflictual things, it always makes it more difficult. It always makes it more difficult. So, and that's the thing too, because when you're responding to conflict, you got to talk about the conflict first, then don't you? But when you take them through, when you give them a book, or you try to, give them get the opportunity where you can give them a presentation or have them take an online presentation that's pre-made, then they can get the proper foundation in place. And it becomes a reality that people need to understand the immutability of Islam, to its texts, and they won't learn everything about that and the nuances of it right away and all that type of stuff. But the mental habit of people in the West is an organization or a group of priests or a church decides what religion is, if you look at it in any type of official type way. So that can change. And then, the individual can just decide. You have to explain in a comprehensive way why it's just not that. Okay. Because that's what so much just comes down to. Okay. This question says, our son is in year 10 here in Toronto. LGBTQ topics come up all the time, especially with the teachers who don't identify as their biological gender. I don't know if year 10 means sophomore or 10 years old. He's confused about what he can say without getting in trouble or seeming rude or disrespectful. I don't know how much you know about the strict legal legislations here in terms of addressing and talking about the LGBT community. How should we handle it? Yeah, I'm not sure what the legal restrictions are and things in Canada. I'm not. I know I have had things sent to me from Canada, like kindergarten type curriculum and this type of stuff that I thought was very inappropriate. I had a stream, I think last June. I think it was last June. It was June before that now. It's been a long time flies. Where there's a school where they had a lot of Muslim kids and they all didn't show up on a day where the school was raising the pride flag and this type of stuff. And that became a whole thing. You know, I think the pressure of like having to insert themselves is very, very difficult for the kids in these types of situations. So when they can be kept home on days where this type of stuff is going on, if that's known, I think that's better. You know, if they are prompted to have to say they support X, Y, or Z or something, that's really not appropriate. So, you know, teaching them how to, you know, like staying silent is usually the best. It's usually the best option for kids for all different types of reasons in doing this. Okay. Like, because like even if they speak constructively about it, they're around other young people who don't regulate their emotions well. So like even saying something, even if you train them to say something in a calm way, in a constructive way, they're not in a context where it's set up to be taken that well by everybody. So you know, it's best that they just don't have that type of pressure on them. It's really a lot to ask for the kids. It's really a lot. So we need to try to not have them in those situations as much as possible. You know, try to work with the school with that. And then, you know, it's okay for them to stay silent. That's what's best, in my opinion. I really think it's too much pressure for them otherwise. Okay. Excuse me. My daughter is in a school. You can still, Jason says, you're basically saying people are bigger jerks in England. Well, maybe they are less inhibited about externalizing it in England. You know, I've wondered about that. I'm not saying that. Okay. I know Brits think they're polite and stuff. I mean, I'm in the Midwest here. People are very, very sensitive about making sure they don't offend people in the Midwest. But I've seen it similar on the East Coast too. But I'm not sure. You know, like England has a specific relationship with the Muslim community. It's a bigger Muslim community. You know, I think like uh, I don't know the culture of England. I really don't. Okay, but I'm just telling you what people have told me that they've said. Okay, I honestly I can't imagine in Minnesota, really in America, a family making like a request for a religious accommodation or consideration for their kid, and the principal feeling so bold as to just shoot back saying you're an extremist. I certainly can't see that happening in Minnesota. I think people would be way more sensitive than that. Okay, people are polite in general. Mahmoud says, in the greater Austin area, there are only 2 Islamic schools. Third one's starting up, but definitely not enough. Everyone has huge wait lists. How do we get more started up? Go start one up, you know. I have a stream with Abdurrahman Ikar. He just started one in a masjid. They let him use the musalla, you know. Same with Asufa Academy. It all just starts small. Everything just starts small and it builds from there. Okay. Like, you know, can you raise funds to, you know, get a building, this type, you know, start in your home if that's where you can. You know, okay, like do you have the ability yourself to raise funds from the community to like start a big project that helps put resource foundations in place? Some people in the community have that capacity. I don't have that capacity. Most of us here, we don't have that capacity. So if you don't have that type of capacity in the community, that's fine. Don't be upset about that. But what you do is you start doing whatever work you can in your own capacity. You do it as good as you can. And when you start doing it as good as you can, then people take notice and then more people want a part of it. And then things gradually build from there. And, you know, that can become an aspect of you advertise yourself in a certain way, you brand yourself a certain way, you make people aware of what you're doing in a certain way. That's how you start otherwise. Okay. And, you know, if you do that well enough for long enough, then you might get to a point where someone who does have like a big fundraising capacity in the community approaches you and says, hey, I like what you're doing. I want you to scale it with this, and that type of stuff. I'm going to help you. I'm starting to see, I've been doing engaging Muslim students in public schools since 2016. 2017. No, I can't remember. 2017. So I'm on 8 years doing this now. Okay, I'm just starting to get to the point where I have some people in the Muslim community in America who are approaching me in that type of way, having those types of talks. All right. So, you know, a lot, just do what you can with as little as you can or with whatever you have. Okay. I didn't mean to offend anyone who's in England. Okay. I'm not trying to say British people. I like British people. I love British brothers and sisters. Okay. When I was in Jeddah, the UK expatriate brothers and sisters. I got along with them famously. Would love to visit sometime. I'm not trying to say anything bad about England, and I am Anglo-Saxon in my ethnic origins on my mother's side, so don't give me a hard time, please, okay? My daughter's in a school choir that sing Christian hymns. She enjoys singing very much. I'm just uncomfortable with the idea of her singing, let alone singing Christian carols. How should I speak to her in the school in order to get them to understand the seriousness of this? So I'm assuming this is a UK question, because in America they will sing Christmas stuff, but they're conscious about not doing the Christian ones generally. Okay. So again, brothers and sisters, I have the resources. Proactive education is better than reactive education. Okay. Like, how do you get them to understand the seriousness of this? This is the whole point, brothers and sisters. You can't get people to understand the seriousness of, because Western people can have this view, like, they have to understand the way in which Muslims value multiculturalism. All right. Because Western people value multiculturalism, but part of what is inherent in their way of valuing it is we imitate what everyone does, and we we appropriate it in certain ways, or whatever. So, hey, I'm willing to sing songs from, and I'm sure, like, if she's in a music program, I'm sure that they do, like, different music stuff and singing stuff from different cultures in the world. So, I bet if you were to just go and say, hey, I don't want my kids sing Christian songs, they might come back saying, well, we sing songs from West African tradition. We sing songs from Eastern European and, South Asian tradition. They'll say stuff like that. So why can't you do the same? It's always that type of thing, So they have to understand the details of why we have these specific sensitivities in our religion. And if saying it's against my religion, so I can't do that, if that makes us look rude and that's too difficult a thing for us to do, well, then we have no choice but to explain it to them in a comprehensive manner where they learn thing A, B, C, and D as they need to really understand it. So they go, oh, now I get it, this type of thing. So it begins with understanding that Islam is a text-based religion, teaching what those texts are, and then teaching it through the texts so they see that we have to stick to what this says. So that's why in my book, they will read the saying of the companion, Abdullah ibn Amr, may Allah be pleased with him, that anyone who resides in the lands of the non-Muslims and he partakes in their festivities, or he just imitates them, he will find themselves raised up amongst them on the day of judgment. And that gives an explanation of what exactly that means. They need that. That is what they need, and to understand that our religion bounds us to what these texts say. That is the comprehensive education that they need. So they need to be brought through things from A to Z in a constructive manner, and there's really no way to do that except to ask them to sit down and take in some information for an extended period of time, either by reading or listening to someone present. So anyway, that's what my resources do. That's what Engaging Muslim Students in Public Schools is put together to do. Okay, and look again, guys. People in the Western world. The funny thing too is that, like, Muslims, they either have these concerns or their concern is, I don't want to seem rude to people, or oh, my coworkers build the school, they're so nice, so I don't want to bother them, that type of stuff. It's like, okay, so which is it? Which is it? Are you perturbed that they are insensitive to your religious needs and that bothers you, or are you so enamored with them and their politeness that you are too humble then to even bother them? Which is it? Because if they are so, and look, in my opinion, okay, people in the West, certainly people in America, the average person is very nice. The average person is very open-minded. The average person does not want anyone to be upset or offended. And the average person, if their neighbor or the family of the child they teach in school, if they have certain desires to live out their life in a certain way, they want that for them. That is generally what I see from the average person. So, we shouldn't let media drive us crazy and make us too defensive and scared about what people are going to think. Because if you really isolate, if you forget about that and you really think about your average interactions with people, that's usually what people see, what I just said, that they're open-minded for it. So if they're open-minded for it, then, they're open-minded to have something to be offered to them to learn in an extended way. And then just a question of whether or not you want to do the work. And again, my resources are meant to do the work easier. Now, guys, I love you guys. Like, I really do. I like live stream, all this type of stuff. I am starting to remember as I do this now that part of the reason why, and I know not everyone tunes into every stream, but sometimes you feel like you're saying the same stuff over and over again when you do this. But that's part of life. I get that's some I'm learning as I'm getting old. That's part of life, because the answers are the same at the end of the day, I mean, and actually what I'm starting to think, what I want to do some videos more is maybe just talking out the sensitivities of like, how you exactly approach something, like just send an email with a suggestion. Hey, I'd like to have a time with you where I can give you a presentation about Islam and the religious needs of Muslims. Or, I'd like you to introduce you to this course or this book or this type of stuff. Okay. And yeah, look, the course for engaging Muslim students is behind a paywall. If I do have 90-minute presentations on the YouTube channel of me doing it in front of schools that you can send for free. But if money is an issue with someone you need to get to, just let me know and we'll make the arrangements that need to be. Okay. I started teaching at a Libyan Islamic school in Manchester, and we have a couple of students who just won't listen. They joke around, distract others, and make teaching really hard. How do we get through to them without constantly punishing them because they seem to start enjoying punishments at this school? At this point, it makes them look cool. Yeah, so this is a good question. And the way the question is asked really illustrates like the kids are desensitized to whatever punishment. So you can't always use punitive measures, nor can you always use rewards, because when you just rely on that stuff, kids get desensitized to it. So for the person asking this, I have up on my channel right now, Parenting Skills Muslims Need. It's a great course for teachers. I teach that stuff through videos of me and others teaching to break down interactions with kids. You got to get good with nonverbal communication to manage kids like this. You got to know the tactics that you have to use with kids who are highly social. And this happened, like the behavior described here, this is the reality of a lot of educational contexts where the kids are Muslim, whether it is public schools being taught by non-Muslims, public schools being taught by Muslims, religious private schools, weekend masjid schools, no matter what it is. And if you read chapter 2 of my book, I go over research from across the Western world of case studies of Muslims that show that across ethnicities and different places, this is how Muslim kids act in school. Why? Because Muslims kids are socially tight-knit. They come to class. If there's a group of them, they know each other outside of school better than the non-Muslim kids do. So they have social interactions outside of school that carry in and just keeps going. Or they have bigger families, a lot of times kids and their family members, that type of stuff. So the question becomes, what skills does a teacher need to deal with a group of kids who are highly social and socially tight-knit? Okay, that's what it becomes. And nonverbal communication is just a really huge thing to understand. That's why I go over it in my course, amongst other things, all right? Excuse me, guys. Been a little sick. People across America are sick. Mila Han, Philosopher's Corner, says, keep up the good work, brother. Jazakallah khair, sister. I appreciate the nice video you did on your channel about my channel and that type of thing and recommending me to your followers. I appreciate that very much. Thank you. Your work is very valuable. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay. The Libyan school, Manchester. Yeah. Okay. Maybe someone knows the school. Okay. Yeah. And I'm trying to get to the European ones for my European followers because they've given me a little bit of a hard time for not doing a stream when they're available. Excuse me, guys. I go to school in Bradford, and sometimes my classmates ask questions about Islam that I don't know how to answer. Like, why do women cover? Why do you cover when praying 5 times a day is OCD? Why can't you date? What's the best way to respond? So I really like it when I hear that young people like at high school age are following the channel. I have a few questions from that. Usually those people, if you're able to follow a channel like this, you're probably on an advanced maturity level for your age, which is a good thing. Keep maturing. Being a little bit more mature than kids your age when you are young and you are in K through 12 schooling, especially middle and high school, that can be a very, very big burden. Okay. That can be a very, very big burden. It can be a very lonely type feeling. Okay. So I first say to the person asking this to, take that lonely feeling that you might have, just know sticking to your religion is something Allah rewards you for. And Allah will not grant you to Jannah without putting you through trials as others were put to trial before you in generations past. So just always keep that in mind. And at the end of the day, you have to learn how to not fear the blame of the blamers. I say usually, okay, each thing you asked, brother or sister, whichever it was who asked this, you know, okay, I mean, the thing is too, like the reason why we do anything in Islam comes down to the Prophet ﷺ said to, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said so. That is the reason why. Now, what's the secular benefit of it, or the real world, the dunya benefit of it? That's stuff that, I mean, you can consume Islamic content and look at that stuff and try to talk about with kids as best you want if you like. Okay, I mean the benefits of modesty and women covering. It makes it so society is less sexualized. That keeps family. There's all this type of stuff. You can watch this sister's channel, Milahan. This is a sister who had a channel where she does all this reading of books and talks about them, and like she converted to Islam, like through her channel. I say through her channel, or like it happens like her channel started before it. So now she talks a lot about these types of intellectual justifications to Western people in a way. So sometimes like Muslim kids in the West who are raised by a Muslim family, they don't always they need examples of seeing someone talk that way to to non-Muslims. And we didn't plan this, by the way, but this sister's channel in particular, especially if your sister, if there's a sister who asked us, it's a good example of seeing someone talk about the intellectual justifications. Now, I say too, more important than that, though, at the end of the day, for a young person, if you want to get into these types of talks with your classmates, some people are more comfortable with that than others. People who are more extroverted tend to do it better and be more comfortable with it. And you got to be comfortable with the idea of it's not going to go well when you first do it, because it becomes a learning process like everything else. And you can't feel like awful if it doesn't go well, that type of stuff. You have to learn to not fear the blame of the blamers. And if this stuff is being asked to you in any type of way that is a bullying type of way, okay, like the O's, like the praying 5 times a day is OCD, this kind of OCD accusation about Islam, it's a bullying type thing. If you want to get that to stop, the way that you put down bullying is by not responding to it, not responding to it verbally or non-verbally. So like when a kid is teased who gets bullied, one thing that you do to build the skill up in that kid is you train that kid to not say anything, or to say just something that shows that you really don't care about what the kid is saying when being bullied. And sometimes like counselors in schools, they will do activities with kids. Well, they will say, okay, tell me the mean thing that kid says to you. And they tell them, they said, okay, I'm going to say that mean thing to you. And what I want you to do when I say it is just keep a plain face. Don't look me in the eye, because eye contact is emotionally elevating. And, if I keep bothering you with, and don't say anything to me, if I keep bothering you with it, just say, that's nice. Or just say, if it's a question, just say, go find it out for yourself. Just something that shows you don't really care. Because ultimately, something that is pretty consistent is when someone bullies you, they're looking for a reaction, and they are looking to get some sort of rush out of the reaction. They may or may not want your attention. But if you give any type of emotional reaction to them, then that feeds it. So if you want to diffuse the bullying aspect of it, just act like you're not that interested and you have better things to do, in a calm way, in a way where you're posture is calm, your face stays relaxed and stuff, because that's what really shows people that you're not affected by it. And that takes some work. Okay. It takes some work and some mental fortitude on yourself to actually not be affected by it, but you shouldn't be. Okay. And you can say something like, look, if you're really interested, we can have a longer conversation about Islam. I'd be happy to present things to you. Okay. I really encourage people to try to set up a format where it's not a dialogue so much, where it's you presenting. Okay. If you look at the Sunnah of the Prophet, ﷺ, how did he first give dawah to the people? Okay. He first built up a lot of trust with them through his character. And then he got on Marwa, correct? It was Mount Marwa, which used to be bigger, by the way, my understanding. It used to be higher up, and he called them. He got on a platform and called them, and he asked, if I told you there was a cavalry coming, would you believe me? Yes, they would. So he established that they're willing to listen. Okay, that is the first thing you need to do in giving someone down. And then you can talk to them about it from A to Z. Okay, like you want to, and so it's okay to say to people, look, if you really want to learn about Islam, if you're really interested in that, I'd be happy to meet with you someday or give you some resources that you can learn from. But otherwise, just stop bothering me about this. Okay, that's all. Good question. May Allah make it easy for that brother or sister. Let's see. I homeschool, and I always feel like I'm either not teaching. You guys in the chat, you can put a question in the chat. Feel free. I'm answering ones that have been collected over time, but I'm more than happy to answer ones in the chat or comment on something that's said. I know some people, they might not be current with the stream when they're on. Put up the reminder to ask questions. Okay. I homeschool, and I always feel like I'm either not teaching enough Islamic studies or I'm neglecting math and science. I can't find the right balance. Any advice? Well, I would say, don't put undue pressure on yourself when you're homeschooling. Okay. I think one of the big benefits of homeschooling is you can really figure out things that work best. I wouldn't be concerned about prioritizing Islamic studies. I think one of the best things about homeschooling is that you can enable yourself and the child to get into different types of flows of learning. So this idea that you got to study like a bunch of different subjects in the same day, does it always need to be that way? I don't think it always needs to be that way. I know school is structured that way. Homeschooling doesn't have to be structured that way. I mean, now if you've committed them to an online curriculum or something that they're taking, maybe you put them in that position. But if it's just you deciding the education for the kid, which I think is the best way to do homeschooling, then you have freedom for this type of stuff. So it's okay to be in a flow of studying Islamic studies and really getting deep into that. And, there's reading skills in that, and then you finish a book or something, like when you get into a flow of learning something like that, I think there's natural concluding points that we'll come to. And then you can say, look, we need to spend a little time focusing on, this math book, and you get a good math curriculum, that type of stuff, but, but they will get good experience learning. Getting into good flows of learning makes them better learners in general. So it doesn't hurt in setting them up learning the other thing as well. Okay. So I that sounds to me kind of like a concern that you don't have to always have. Milan says sometimes I'll feel awkward if the person's aggressive. Yeah. So if the person's aggressive, this goes back to the conversation about asking about Islam. The way you de-escalate situations is through being calm yourself with your nonverbals, with your body posture, because of your breathing. Okay, watch my parenting course. I go over it. It's a really important strategy to have, like for all different types of situations. Kingdom of Ahl Sunnah says, alayhi alaikum salam. Aki, do you think homeschool better than public school? Look, the way I really think about it is that if you can homeschool your kids, it's a beautiful opportunity. That I don't know why you'd want to deny your kids that. Okay. Now, just to be transparent, I did not homeschool my kids. My wife didn't homeschool our kids. My kids go to public school. So I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but it's like, why would you want your kids? Who do you want to be the predominant influence in your kid's life? You want it to be you and your spouse in raising your kids, or do you want it to be kids at school? All right.
especially from ages 4th through 9th grade, okay, like ages 10 through 14. The peer culture just gets so toxic during that time, and kids are so petulant and getting bold with it. Like it's like during that time, I think especially is the best time, like if you're nervous about doing it, it's going to be like anything else that you do where you're going to have to struggle in the beginning and learn how to get good with it. Okay. So why not try it if you can do it, if you have the means to do it? Because if you have the means to do it, okay, one parent is available, etc. If you have the means to do it, and the only reason not to do it is I don't feel like I can. I mean, just ask yourself, like, I feel like I need these other people to be the primary influence in my kid's life. No, you got to get right with that, and watch my parenting course. It will help. Okay. Subhanallah says homeschooling is amazing, mashallah. Yes, very true. Cerulean says, yeah, okay, all right. Again, put questions that you have, okay? Bismillah. Need my morning liquids here, guys. Drink a lot of liquids in the morning. Bismillah. Have more questions here, okay? Go ahead and keep putting them in the chat. Hour and 26 minutes. Got time still. I have a super smart but talkative student in my homeschool group. Interesting. This person's homeschooling from a group. She steals the time on my lesson plan by always asking hypothetical questions. It's either not allowing her to ask or listening to her endless questions that she formulates in ways that take 10 minutes to understand. I feel bad that my students as they get disengaged when she does that. I feel bad for my other students that get disengaged. I love that she's smart and engaged, but how do I keep her from derailing the lesson? That's an interesting question and not a bad problem to have, because at least she is engaged. Usually this is the type of student, though, who can be reasoned with one-on-one, because if she is, really participating, okay, so she's highly verbal, she processes everything verbally. I have a daughter who is exactly like this, but this is usually a child who can be reasoned with one-on-one pretty well. And usually a child like that, if she's asking hypothetical questions, did it say how old she is? Didn't say how old. With kids, like a thing you're doing ongoingly with kids is kids have limited environmental awareness, okay? Meaning limited awareness of the environment around them, limited awareness of what you call theory of mind, meaning the ability to conceptualize that other people have minds of their own from which they see things, or they have their own perspective on things. So that the ability to appreciate those things and understand the impact of your actions external to yourself, that is something that develops over time in any human being. So you're always trying to push kids further along in that continuum. So with this type of child, you just say, look, I love your questions. It's really great, but you have to understand that when I come to class, sometimes, there's a certain amount of stuff we get through. And sometimes you asking so many questions makes it so I can't get through anything. So I might have to shut you down sometime. Okay. And look, another thing too with being a teacher, just explain the context to the kids a little bit more, or to the kid a little more. Another thing that I've actually gone over this a lot, I found with the Sufa Academy teachers, and some I found from my observations with them. Because look, as a teacher, you have to value what you have to say and what you came to teach. And if this is a homeschool group, I don't know if this is a parent or like if you were someone hired, there's other kids, this doesn't sound like it's your kid. So, you have to value what you have to say when you come in there. So you can't let kids questioning dominate the class. All right. So you have to know at any point in the instruction, are you taking questions or not during that time of instruction? And when you have to deliver the important core instructional material and be connecting ideas, kids' questions can derail the sequence of what you're saying. So that's a point where the kid raises their hand. You say, you just say, I'm not taking questions right now. Okay. I'll let you know when I am taking questions. Okay, you don't have to do it so firm. All right. Even within taking questions too, there's another thing I teach kids in school. You have to know is it, if you are taking questions, are you taking logistical questions, or are you taking academic/content questions only, or are you willing to take both? What do I mean by logistical questions? I mean, can I go to the bathroom? Can I go get a drink of water? I need some, that type of stuff. Okay. Because some kids, they just derail the whole thing, like with constantly asking these questions. And again, how do you get kids to stop? You just stick to it when you say, I'm not taking that right now, that type of stuff. Okay. Look, another thing you can do, something I've worked on with the Asufa teachers too, actually, is I mean, like, you don't want to talk too long at kids without having them do something. So like, you give an idea, you have them write it down. Okay, you can have this girl keep a notebook where she writes down her question, maybe as she's doing it. You can give the kids mini whiteboards. I'm not going to get too big into that, but that's a whole other thing that you can use, is to have the kids have constant communication with. Farouk Broberg, assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. My dear brother Farouk, this brother is an old friend of mine who I am very heartened to see in the chat. Jazakumullah khairan. Farouk Broberg, for those of you who want to know, if you want to know something, I know I'm going to have some followers who find this interesting. The brother whose question I have highlighted right now, or comment I have highlighted right now, Farouk, he's from Minnesota. He's not here right now. But we were old reverts together back in the day, back in like 2007, 2008. So his brother is very, very dear to me. And he is actually the brother who connected me with Sajid Lippum. Okay, not a lot of people know that. A lot of people think Sajid and I, we just connected like through knowing each other through YouTube. No, this brother's a graduate from Medina. And actually, if you look at Sajid's old videos, he has a video with his brother in it. And because Sajid is interested in education and starting schools and this type of stuff, it's a big thing for him. This brother referred me to Sajid and told Sajid to check me out. And that is how I got connected with Sajid Libam. Farouk says, Assalamu alaikum. I'm happy to see you putting an effort to make a change in things you find important. Keep striving. Allah rewards you and great success. I mean, brother, Jazakallah khair. And you likewise. May Allah bless you and your family. Barry Fingers, happy good morning to you. Okay. Thoughts on Murad Humera's situation in the school in Finland? I'm not familiar with it. I'm not sure, brother. I'd have to look into it. I really have not been followed the news lately. Brother Sajid is a gym. Yes, he is. He's a good brother, mashallah. Support what he's trying to do. Okay, let's see. Questions here. Okay. I'm 16 years old. A lot of my Muslim classmates vape, and they think it's fine because it's not smoking, not haram. I know it's wrong, but don't know how to respond when they say that. What advice can I give them? Okay. So, yeah, I'm getting a little tired mentally, but I like the questions that come from young people. Okay, so the vaping is an annoying thing. Alhamdulillah, they're not smoking cigarettes, and vaping is not being done at the rate that kids smoke cigarettes in school in the 90s. That was out of control. But there are lessons to be drawn from what got kids to stop smoking cigarettes with vaping as well. And let's talk about that, because this is something that I've talked about in various contexts with different things. This actually relates to social media use in general too, that we can unpack a little bit. Okay, Bismillah. Need some more coffee. So, how did America get kids to stop smoking so much when almost half of kids in high school smoked cigarettes in the 90s? Well, all through the 80s and 90s, the public service announcements, the messaging with smoking was that it's bad for your health. So you can't do it because it's bad for your health. But teenagers, they don't care about that message, because the neurological dynamics of teenagers, make it so that, they downplay risk, especially long-term risk, in their decision-making for the sake of thrill and reward. So all kinds of companies make vice, behaviors associated with addiction. They make it look appealing because by making it look thrilling or new or edgy to kids. So it appeals to teenagers. And if there's risk involved in that behavior, the kids really don't care, because they have a immature capacity to put that into their decision making or give that the proper weight in its decision making. So how did you get kids to stop smoking? Well, at the turn of the century, the public service announcements concerned with anti-smoking campaigns switched to be focused on making the kids feel like they're being manipulated by the greedy corporate executives, okay, in the tobacco industry. And kids want to feel like they're making decisions that are independent from adults, not making decisions that are making them the fools of adults. So nowadays, kids are not as sensitive to being sellouts or being tools of the corporate world as they were in the 90s, because kids don't have as much a concept of that as like selling out or this type of thing. But there's two things here going on because the person asking this is 16. Okay, number one, I'm going to go into the spiel again about how you can't worry about changing other kids. It's too much of a burden upon yourself. And we'll talk about that later. But if you decide to do something, the messaging that is going to work more is if you angle it to your friends saying, like, in a confident way, in a way that's confident and calm, that, look, you are being, well, okay, whatever company it is, like Juul, one of the companies, I think, you're being that company's, the teenage vernacular would say the BITCH word here. Okay. I'm not saying to use that word, be more proper and say you're making yourself a slave to that. Okay. If they're Muslim kids, they should be sensitive to that term and that idea. You're doing that, you're hurting your health, but you're getting money for them. You're wasting your money for them. So you're being their slave, or you're being their, use the vernacular term if you really need to, okay? Because I know sometimes kids got to use that to feel like they're being to feel comfortable. That's the kind of message you want to give to them. Now, look, a thing with teenagers who are good and better behaved, and who they can really, really care about what their peers are doing, and they really, really have a strong desire to want to help their peers and help turn them around. I'm going through this quite a bit with my 15-year-old right now, and what she's experienced with her peers and wanting to really be a help. You cannot overburden yourself at that age. Even though you're a close friend to them, that doesn't mean you're someone that they are necessarily positioned to take advice from. And overburdening yourself, you have to focus on your own personal development and your own choices in life, okay? But if you hold to the same choice, and so sometimes when kids do bad behavior, and for you to hold to the same choice means you have to separate from them eventually, okay? And you might not ever be able to help them, but if you stick to the right thing and you stick to that commitment to want to help young people, you will see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will open up the doors for you to do that for someone else later. Or if you stay being a good example to that person, they maybe are not going to take you as an example today, tomorrow, or next week, or even this year. They're not positioned for you to do that as an adolescent peer for them. But it might be years later when you are on a better track than them, and they have stronger abilities to reflect on life, and they come back to you and say, hey, I see now that you were right, or you knew you were what you were doing and we didn't, so now I'm struggling in life. Help me, please. You'd be surprised when they get to that point in life where they get humbled by their poor behavior choices, okay? IT, how we doing? 138. Okay, guys, anyone in the chat, feel free to throw a question. Otherwise, I'll keep going through these. I teach high schoolers in Mississauga. This is the Toronto area. A lot of Muslims there. And some of them just roll their eyes when I talk about Islamic values. So it's probably an Islamic private school. I have trains in the Ontario area, ISNA schools. So if you teach at a private school in the Toronto area, get in touch with Tariq Mahmoud, who is the vice principal at ISNA Elementary School, because they really, I did it online, but they really appreciated my training. And, I'd be happy to come to the Toronto area sometime or train your school online and refer me to the admin. Sometimes some of them just roll their eyes when I talk about Islamic values. They're so dismissive. How do I actually get them to care? I'm new to teaching and I get intimidated. I sometimes feel bullied by my own students. Okay. Yeah. So if you're new, if you're a new teacher, the biggest thing you have to work on is not taking things personal that the kids do. Okay. Lots of people struggle their first year, second year, third year teaching. That is what I would focus this question on. This is probably a younger person. And that comment, how do I get them to actually care? This is similar to what I was just telling the 16-year-old in the question. Okay. You can't put your burden on that because Hidayah comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right. But you don't get through school and teaching without learning how to not take things that the kids do personally. Why? Because when you take things personally and you get too emotionally affected by it yourself, it will show on you one way or the other to the kids. Okay. You certainly don't want to get all stressed out and all that type of stuff. But even like subtle things that it's like you have to learn how to stay relaxed and unaffected by it. And when you do that, that earns you respect from the kids. That earns you more respect. All right. The rolling the eyes things, okay, like what's behind that type of thing with a kid in an Islamic school doing that? Okay, so maybe he's bored from hearing it all the time. Maybe with sometimes this type of thing with kids, they feel like I've heard this a million times, and look, we don't do it. They're frustrated with their own failure in it and other kids' failure. Okay. And sometimes the Muslim kids in the West, or just Muslim kids in general, sometimes they feel like failures when it comes to Islam. Okay, when they're constantly being told this, and that, and they just can't develop the self-discipline because sometimes kids are growing up in families or in communities where there's a disconnect between the expectation of the messaging and then the actual things that are in place to train them to have the discipline that they need. So that is a failure on the adults. So if it's that, like these things need to be talked out with kids. Okay. And we need to show kids that we are self-reflective ourselves. Say, look, I know like you hear these things all the time, and maybe you feel like you haven't been able to practice them the best in your life, or maybe even our whole community, we haven't done the best. But you will find over time that you become able to do this. And it's very important. Okay. Like broadening their perspective, that type of thing is kind of what you have to do. Okay. And look, I will say in those types of contexts where the kid is having this disconnect. Yeah, you always say to tell us to be little angels, and then we're not, and you're not also. So I'm tired of hearing this type of stuff. There does need to be some about face from the adults in those situations, and there has to be some vulnerability, as it is called, and you have to be willing to reflect. So yeah, we haven't done the best. We're all trying, okay? And kids appreciate adults who are like that and who stay calm with them. Is he rolling his eyes because he or she has some intellectual conviction about Islam that they don't want to hear anymore? Maybe, but in my experience, that's usually not the case. And from what I hear from people, it's usually not. I know it happens sometimes, but it's usually not that. Excuse me. Okay, let's see here. Zahir has got it. I don't have kids yet. I want my kids in the future to be very successful. Example, speaking 4 languages by age 10. Okay, that's an interesting goal. Becoming very wealthy, well-respected, good networking, good in their relationships. Big ambitions. What's the best way of preparing for this? Thoughts on having a military-type strictness with children so they have memorized the Quran and many hadiths, high intelligence, many languages, polymath type of thing? Well, that's a big question, brother. I first of all would hedge against, okay, like 4 languages by age 10. That's like a really specific goal with like a specific deadline in place. Sometimes those types of goals can be a little self-sabotaging when you have them for kids. It could create a sense of urgency in you to push them maybe where they shouldn't be pushed before that age to try to get them to this goal that you have in mind if you're really attached to it when they weren't set up well to do that. So like with language development, okay, the environment that they are in is going to play a really, really big part in that. There is opportunity for kids to develop languages at young ages in multiple languages, but they need the environment for it, so have you set them up well for that as far as that specific goal goes? Okay. Now, as far as thoughts on military style training, okay, like disciplining kids, disciplining meaning training them to be self-controlled. If you watch my maybe you are inspired to ask this based on my most recent video that I posted where I was giving the talk to the parents at the private school here, where we're doing this really high expectations thing and the different aspects I talked of it. Okay. So keeping kids within tight boundaries, that is part of a training mechanism. Now, you do want to be careful with that in early childhood and really through child because you still want to have room for free exploration and play. And you want them to have exploration of nature, especially in my opinion, and at least natural materials and to get sensory experience, all that type of stuff. And you want them to be able to explore with it. Okay. So like a preschool, it's not appropriate for like a preschool to train kids to like sit and listen for a long time because it's not only not something that they can do, but it's not what they need at that age. All right. And even like, younger kid or even kids who are older than that, elementary school age, we want to train them to be like really, really well in school, but we also want to have contexts where, we're taking them out into nature and we're walking on trails and they have the chance to climb on trees and all this type of stuff. Okay? I believe that stuff is really, really important. Go to the beach and explore the sand and all those types of things. Okay. And even in home, okay, even in home with more structured things, craft projects that have creative elements. So it is good for kids to have a balance of that stuff. Okay. You'll find those things are ways to fill time where like, because the mind can only take so much like discipline focus. So it's good ways to fill time in productive ways. And it's good for emotional development, all type of stuff. Okay. If you look at the last video I had where I'm talking about like training the kids in school to follow these really tight behavior expectations, no, I only got compliments from parents after that. I'm sure there'll be a parent or two who give some pushback to the principal, but not my job to deal with that. And I do anticipate like what I did there. Some people might say this sounds like you're running a military camp or something like that, and that sounds too mean. However, if you watch what I said, this is why I'm so big on this focus on nonverbal communication. Because if you think of a military type camp, like, yeah, they teach really hard discipline and all that type of stuff, but they're usually highly charged when they do that. Okay. And they're preparing people for war. So like, military training has this aspect to it of getting people to operate in a certain way, to operate on adrenaline in a certain way. Okay. Whereas what I teach is you learn how to control your adrenaline release so you can deal with kids in a relaxed way, because that is what helps the mind to mature really more. Because, unless you are preparing them for war, but this isn't, not preparing them for war. Military is preparing them for war. Okay. That's what military also do. They teach like a desensitized view of your opponent, like in the army and stuff, they will teach, if you're going into battle, they will teach you to not see your opponent as human because you can't afford to, because and this type of stuff. So I mean that's what I'm saying. Like you don't want to be like really tense with your kids most of the time. You want to save tense interactions for select moments where you really need it. The other things you more want to carry out in a calm and comfortable way, so they can experience you as an adult who is caring. Now, again, like if you cheat, you model things for them, you show them explicitly what you want. You want to keep kids within boundaries because that does help train their discipline. And when they get out of it, you remind them, or they get out of the expectations, you have them practice again. If they get out of the expectation persistently enough or in a way that really that feels like defiance, and then you give them a punishment. But even when meeting out punishments, actually something I forgot to tell parents in that presentation I gave in the last video, I meant to tell them that if they get a phone call home from a SUFA about a misbehavior with these things, that they don't have to like get all mad and upset at the kids. That's the whole thing that's actually important in the school parent relationship, for a school to establish with kids or with the parents, that like, a phone call home letting you know that the kid is going to a consequence system is just letting you know that they're in the consequence system. Because a school shouldn't make, nor a teacher, they shouldn't make the parents feel like, I'm calling home because I need you to use your shaming upon the kids and your punishing of the kids to get them to act a certain way in school or to act a certain way in my class. That puts too much burden on the parents. and it can ruin their relationship with the kids. What I wanted to tell the parents was, you just need to say to the kids, okay, you did something, you didn't follow the expectations calmly. You just have to carry out the consequence. That's why detention is nice, because detention is an inconvenience, but it can all be carried out without strictness in the sense of being tense. Okay. All right. So those are really good questions. I appreciate it and hope that answers it. Where are we? Hour 15 minutes. Inshallah. I have questions collected too that come from non-Muslim teachers. I think I'll do a separate stream where I just go through that, because I don't see those people in the chat ever, but I've done polling of my followers before. And I know some of them, they're just non-educators who found some of my videos that went viral. But when I did polling before, like 30% of the response said they weren't Muslim with the channel. Okay, let's see here. Clovis, assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum salam. My brother misbehaves a lot with my mom due to bad parenting. I think he's very entitled, spoiled, and un-Islamic. How can I change him? He's 4 years younger than me. I wonder how old you are, Clovis. Yeah, this bad parenting does lead to spoiled and entitled kids, and a lot of parents, they are stuck in this trap of they're always tense with the kids. So that triggers to the kids that they got to be tense and pushy with people. And then when the parent gets tired of being tense, then they give the kids rewards. Something I think I meant to say earlier when I had that question about holidays and like Halloween and Christmas celebrations. Don't get into the trap of overly, because I know some Muslim parents, what they do, they restrict the kids from all the different holidays and birthday celebrations going on. And then because they feel guilty for that, what they do instead is they buy the kid whatever they want, whenever they want it. And especially the parents who have some more means, they do that. That isn't good either. That makes your kid spoiled as well. That makes your kid spoiled. And so you can't get into that trap to thinking like, okay, the non-Muslims are doing all this celebrating fun. If I just compensate it by, giving my kid all the toys and all the amusement park trips and stuff outside that he wants or she wants outside of when these celebrations are happening, you can't do that. Okay. You need to teach the kids to have appreciation for why we do things the way that we do and why Islam says what it says, and train them to be disciplined. Okay. Now, look, as an older brother, if you think that you have, and I don't know the age difference here. Okay. Sometimes, I learned a fair amount from my older brother growing up. My older brother was 3 years older than me. We shared a room together. I have my two older daughters sharing a room together. So when they go to bed at night, a lot of times I hear them talking. I think that kind of older sibling talk can be good. It can be beneficial at times. Sometimes an older sibling can have insights in a way to the parents that maybe the younger sibling doesn't, that they can share with, or they can have insights into peer culture that the child is about to face in school that they can help prepare them for, and this type of thing. It's usually natural. It's not always the case that younger siblings of the same gender respect and want the attention and affection of the older one. So, I think you can try to have talks with him in the appropriate context where you'd be like, look, I know mom is like this, that type of thing, but remember that. Or, like, okay, maybe you get what you want all the time, but you can't let that type of stuff. Okay. Don't expect quick changes. Okay. When kids need an overhaul, the changes happen with consistent messaging over time. Okay. Not right away. This person asks, I speak 4 languages. I learned each one at a time. My 3-year-old is bilingual. Her says, if you give instructions to kids in one language and talk to them in that one language, then switch to another, you can do it. Thank you for that input. That's I was thinking the same thing, that you don't want it mixed up too much. Yes, absolutely. Might speak two, and they're 3 and 4. Mashallah. Yeah, I mean, at those young ages, like, kids pick up stuff well. I like, if you can have a kid, like, live in one country where they speak one language you want them to learn at like age 3, 4, and then have them live in a different country with a different language at age 5, 6. They will probably be able to manage that switch better than a person as far as language is concerned at an older age. And like, you have to remember, developmentally, the way kids work, prepubescent, they just absorb things. Then you hit adolescence, the brain starts pruning and becomes more selective with what it holds on to. And by the time you get older, your mind only holds on to the most important things that you use a lot. And that is why older people seem to struggle with their memory. So, like younger ages are times where more input kids can retain it. They might not retain it if it doesn't stay useful to them, or if they're not using it once they get into adolescence. Excuse me. I'm sorry, I'm having these sinus issues. It's beautiful goal, Allah Mubarak. Agreed. Sarah says, what do you think of the idea that fathers should spend less time with their kids, but the time they spend should be very valuable? Example, teaching them things, blah, 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 blah. Well, I'm never going to say that any parent should spend less time with their kids. Okay. I don't see any benefit really in that. And I will say too, I've had some brothers try to get me to say things in my content to promote the idea that somehow like the dad is less needed, especially in early childhood and this type of stuff. So it's okay for him to be out and about more or traveling more because he's not needed. Like, oh, the kid needs the dad more when he's I don't believe that personally at all. Okay. I think in the early childhood ages, babies and stuff, the dad should be trying to hold the kids as much as he can. And, I always say you should have reading time with the kids at night. The kid should read in dad's lap like he reads on mom and dad's lap. And if it can be done all together, I think that is great as well. Okay. So I'm never going to say that the dad should spend less time with the kid. I'm never going to say that. But I understand it's a reality sometimes that some dads can't be there as much as the mom. Okay. And in my family, of course, it's that way too, because you're working all this type of stuff. And if you travel, if you're something like a truck driver, or you have to work in a different state or country, some people are in that situation because that's the circumstance. I know all that type of stuff is challenging. Okay. So the father, no matter what, should strive to have a consistent and predictable time with their kids. Ideally daily. If it can't be daily, some other time. If there's distance, what is the regular time that you FaceTime with the kids? So they at least know that time is coming. And do you want the time to be quality? Yeah, you want the time to be quality. The less time, the more important it is quality. But the thing about what you're saying, setting a good example is important at all times. Saying, okay, the dad should spend less time with them, but the time he does spend, he spends teaching. Well, if the dad isn't spending other types of quality time with the kids, then he's not set up as well to teach them when he wants to teach them. Okay. It's really important for the dads to have fun with the kids. A lot of times dads can do that better with kids than the moms can. No offense, moms, but especially when they're young, there is research that shows that like rough housing and horseplay and stuff is very good developmentally for kids when they're young. So things like, getting them up on your knees and you pick them up on the ground or rolling around with them or tossing them up in a way that doesn't like make their head shake in any appropriate way. So that type of stuff, because you don't want to take it too far, all that type of stuff. The dad has the ability to increase the ranges of what is physically possible for kids to experience more so than the mom has. And those are oftentimes thrilling, joyous experiences for the kids. That creates love between the dad and the kid, and love for and connection for the kid with the family in general. And it's all really, really important. Even when they get older, and we're not just talking about like picking them up and this type of stuff. Okay, going out into a long hike in nature. Maybe you do that with, you have 3 kids. You have a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 6-year-old. The 6-year-old, if you want to hike for 2 miles, maybe the 10 and 8-year-old can hack it, but the 6-year-old might need to be carried for a little bit, for a little while. Get up on the shoulders, get up on the back. Can the mom do that? No, that's better done by the dad. Even going out someplace, the mom might not feel safe doing it without the dad there. So, I don't, if the dad can't spend time with the kids, that's because of necessity. That's not because that's better or anything like that. And, just his time is spent teaching or going over the serious stuff. I don't know. I mean, honestly, just in general, quite frankly, that sounds to me more like setting up the family for failure. And it probably more sounds like excuse making that dads came up with over time because they couldn't put in the time and felt bad about it, or they weren't able or didn't know how to put in that other time that is more fun and bonding based. And they started telling maybe their wives or something, or telling the community, yeah, we don't need to be there so much, we just need to be there when stuff needs to get serious, that type of stuff. You do need there to be there when stuff gets serious. Okay, the dad does have this role of being the bottom line, buck stops here type of person. And you'll have those times where the mom is struggling to get the kid to do this or that or whatever, and she's starting to get frustrated, and then the dad comes in and lays down the law, and that acts as a relief for everybody, because the tension of the mom-child interaction that was going off track gets stopped, and the mom feels the relief of having the dad's control come in. You do need that, but it is not just that. And if you don't have the other stuff, the kids will not be as responsive when you do that, and you'll find them pushing back, and the frustration will just compound. So anyway, I appreciate the question, Zahir, but the type of thing you seem to be alluded to is not something I'm really on board with. Clovis says, I'm 15, my brother's 11. Yeah, Clovis, I think that is a good age range and dynamic for you to be able to influence that guy. So just try to have some talks with him. Try to have some talks and be calm with him. Just try to share with him insight that you have. Don't try, and I emphasize insights. It can be a mistake to try to push him, like, you got to do this, to try to control his actions too much. Because a kid, like you described, his actions are impulsive, and young people, their actions are impulsive in general. But try to start giving him insights into why he should try to act more mature. Okay. I feel like I can't relate to him. Well, be patient with him then. Okay. Be patient with him. All right. Compensate. And then when I say patient, I mean not waiting. I mean patient with your mannerisms and the calmness that you exude when talking to him. Okay. Don't portray frustration to him, because you're not setting him up to take wisdom from you if you do that. All right. Compensate celebrating non-Islamic holidays by celebrating the Islamic ones. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. That is correct too. Okay, you want to make the Eids be good and all that type of stuff. But the thing that families face in the West is, it's like there's a holiday celebration at school every month, and then there's the birthday, so it's just going on every month. So it becomes like, okay, you're not going to celebrate that thing at school, but I'll buy you this instead, and it's like going on constantly. I feel like I can't relate to him. He doesn't respect me at all. Just be calm with him. Jazakallah khair for your answers. Okay, brothers and sisters. Jazakumullah khairan. Really had a good time. I'll try to get up. I hope you guys like the new setup. It is more comfortable for me to sit in here. I just feel like 2 hours is kind of excessive. More than 2 hours. I could keep going, but I feel like it's kind of excessive for a stream. So I will try to I'll try to do this more, inshallah. I don't know if it'll happen during Ramadan, though. That's why I made sure it again today, because Ramadan is coming. I ask everyone to reach Ramadan. I meant to say in the beginning. I ask Allah to permit us to reach Ramadan and to benefit from it, and make it a purification for everyone, and to have them have their sins forgiven, and for Allah to accept their good deeds in fasting. Ameen. But yeah, I hope you guys like the new setup. I hope you guys like the new setup. It's more comfortable for me to sit in, so I think I can go into this longer. Farouk's asking, would you recommend Al-Andalus School? They have a branch in Abha, and I think one can choose an Arabic or an American curriculum. Yeah, that's how it was when I was there. Strengths, weaknesses from your experience. Yeah, Sheikh, I'll get to you on WhatsApp about that. Okay, I haven't been at Al-Andalus in 12 years now, so I don't know how it's better or different. You know what I mean? So we'll get to that online. Okay, again, if I don't see you guys during Ramadan, have a blessed Ramadan, and I'll try to do this more regularly coming out of it, inshallah. Okay, jazakumullah khair, barakallahu fikum, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.